Everybody, peace. Welcome to the Sorry to Bother You College Football Show. Wherever or however you're listening, we're so grateful to have you here with us. As you guys know, I'm your host, Sean Cottle, and we got a wonderful show for today, guys. We're going to be recapping all the exciting upsets that took place over the weekend in college football, and what is the cause of that. We're going to be discussing that and then some, guys. But before we get started, be sure to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button as well, so you guys can stay up to date on all the latest content that we post daily. And if you'd like to get exclusive content from the Sorry to Bother You Show, you can do so by going to patreon.com, clicking on the search bar, and typing in Sorry to Bother You Show. That way you can gain access to all of our exclusive content that we post daily. And none of this is possible without you guys, the fans, so we're so grateful and honored for all the love and support that you guys continue to show us day in and day out. It truly is a pleasure to have this platform to talk with you guys about the wonderful world of college football. So with that being said, guys, let's go and get right into it. As you guys know, the biggest upset of the week occurred this past weekend with number 1 Alabama being upset by Vanderbilt by a score of 40-35. And if you were able to watch the game, you were able to see that Vanderbilt did a wonderful job of controlling time and possession and executing their offense by running the wishbone offense out of the shotgun, which is something I hadn't seen in ever, quite frankly. And it was, to some it comes as a surprise, to others it doesn't. For those who don't know, Vanderbilt going into the game was 11-0, going into the fourth quarter with a lead, which means that they did do a good job of maintaining their lead and maintaining that level of intensity to beat opponents. And watching the game, if you watched Alabama, you understood that there was a difference in a level of intensity with this Alabama team compared to last week against Georgia. Watching the game last week against Georgia, specifically the first half, Alabama was firing on all cylinders. They looked like they had cohesiveness on the offensive side of the ball. They were disciplined on the defensive side, not missing assignments, staying at home. And that same execution and that same level of intensity has been missing since the first half of that Georgia game. Frankly, they won the game against Georgia last weekend because they had such a big lead going into the second half. And then, going into the game against Vanderbilt, you could tell that they had a lot of mental lapses, specifically on the defensive end. Offensively, they had 2 key turnovers, 2 of them by Jalen Milroe, had an interception and a lost fumble. And it took the offense a while to get into a rhythm. And a lot of that was overlooked, or a lot of those tendencies, a lot of those issues that young teams typically tend to have has been overlooked because they've been undefeated so far going into the season, talking about Alabama. And, for what I've heard so far are people say, and they go to the extreme and say, well, Alabama's done. They can't do anything under Kalen DeBoer. Right after these same guys were the ones saying that Alabama's back. Alabama's the best team in the country. Alabama's not missing a beat with Kalen DeBoer. And it's just so interesting how things can fluctuate, and not just in college football, and not just in sports, but in life in general. And typically what you see is the people who were your fans when you were at your highest always turn into your haters, into your critics when you're at your lowest. I have an old saying I like to say, a fan is just a hater turned inside out, and vice versa. And you can only take what they have to say with so much credit, so much validity. And this Alabama team is talented. There's a reason they beat Georgia, and there's a reason they were ranked number 1. This is a great team. It's a great Alabama team. And they're extremely explosive on offense. We saw what Jalen Milroe was able to do. We saw what Jam Miller was able to do. We saw what Ryan Williams and Jeremy Bernard, which we saw all these guys were able to do. And listen, for the most part, this is still a young team on the offensive side of the ball. And defensively, we knew that there would be some question marks within the secondary. In the secondary, something that's been a bit of a cause for concern for Alabama, but the interior is good and the linebacker core is great. And listen, this is what happens when a team gets caught off guard. And it's interesting because during the beginning of the week, last week, Kalen DeBoer talked about how him and the coaching staff set up mouse traps and rat traps within the Alabama facility, so that the players would not be caught off guard, and so they would be locked in and on the P's and Q's. And for a coach to do that to his program tells me what the coach knows about his players, and that these players are susceptible to becoming complacent. Because a coach obviously knows his program and his players, his team better than anyone else. And so as a reporter, as a journalist, when I hear that, I got to take some issuance to that. I had to take that take it for what it is. And this is a young team that is susceptible to, like I said, complacency and overlooking certain opponents, and that is something that's common amongst young teams within the sporting world. However, you truly get to measure a team's grit and a team's mental fortitude with how they respond to adversity, not when they're in adversity, how they respond to adversity. And Alabama still has a pretty formidable schedule. They still have to go up against Tennessee, and they still have to play Oklahoma. And one of the fortunate things about the 12-team playoff, though I'm not a proponent of it still, is that 12 teams make the playoff. Now no longer 4. And so Alabama drops down to 7. They're still in the top 10. And so Alabama still has a lot of time to not only regain its place in the standings, but also they still have a chance of making the SEC championship game. So if you're an Alabama fan, there isn't too much cause for concern. Something that happens is when you're Alabama, a team like Alabama or a Georgia, and with Texas is starting to become as well, you're going to get the best of a team every week. Sort of similar to how in the NBA, when the Golden State Warriors had their dynasty, and similar to the NFL and the Kansas City Chiefs in their dynasty right now, you're going to get the best of an opponent because teams gear up to play the best teams. The Davids gear up to go up against Goliath, and that is the trade-off you get. That's the trade-off you make as a great team, as an exceptional talent, that you're willing to accept and take on the best of an opponent day in and day out. So there are no off days. There are no off games. There is no time to take plays off, to take games off when you're at the elite level talent and that elite level of a program. There just isn't. And the Nick Saban regime at Alabama understood that, and that's what Kalen DeBoer is instilling with this Alabama program now under the new tutelage. And there's no cause for concern. It's a surprise when Kansas City loses. It's a surprise. Well, it used to be a surprise when Golden State lost when they had their dynasty. And it's a surprise when Alabama loses. It's a surprise when Georgia loses. It's a surprise when Texas loses. You don't expect these teams to lose. And it's understandable. And obviously Vanderbilt is a great opponent, great team, I should say. And that obviously doesn't take away from the fact that Alabama did underlook Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt's a great team. They're obviously in the SEC. And like I said, they have a very high-powered offense. And in the show, it was on display. But moving forward, I don't believe there's that much cause for concern, and that's because of the 12-team playoff. And like I said, you can take with that what you want away from that. I'm still not a proponent of the 12-team playoff. I think that it gives more margin for error, but also it creates lackluster performances during the games because there's not that much of a sense of urgency. But if you're an Alabama fan, or for the Alabama program, this is the time to truly show what you are made of as an organization, or as a program, I should say. Well, maybe an organization the way NIL is set up these days, but let me know what you guys think. What do you guys think about this upset by Vanderbilt? Is this a sign of things to come for Alabama, or is it merely a blip in the season? Let me know what you guys think. Leave your thoughts in the comment section. I'm looking forward to hearing all about it. And in our next segment, guys, we're going to be talking about a miracle comeback that occurred over the weekend. So be sure to stick around for that, guys. You're not going to miss it. We'll be right back. Everybody, welcome back. In case you missed the first segment of our show, we were recapping the upset that Vanderbilt put up against Alabama and whether or not there's cause for concern for the Alabama program moving forward. And personally, I don't think there is much cause for concern, particularly because it's a 12-team playoff format right now. And you can afford to have one or two losses as a top program and still make the playoff. Whether that's good or bad, that's up to your guys' interpretation. I know I have my own viewpoints on it, but it's entirely up to your prerogative and how you see it. And in this segment, guys, we are going to be recapping a comeback that occurred this past weekend in college football. And listen, I went to bed with this game still going on between Miami and Cal, and the score was 35-10. And I went to bed because I had to be up early the next morning, and I didn't think that Miami had any sort of possibility of coming back from this game with the way that Cal had been dominating the ball on the offensive and defensive side. And I saw that Miami couldn't really get into a rhythm offensively, and Cam Ward really couldn't get into a rhythm, and the pocket was collapsing, and he was getting pressured constantly. So I figured that, okay, well, this would just be Miami's first loss of the season. And I wake up the next morning to find that Miami won the game 39-38. At first I thought it was a glitch. I thought that ESPN had a, they had an error in their website. But then I click on it, and I check other sources, and it said that Miami won 39-38, and I was so astounded and surprised because the fourth quarter in comparison to the first three quarters it's like a completely different game for Miami. And it shows two things. One, that Miami is a highly explosive team, and they do an amazing job of playing with the tide, which means that when it's up, they play phenomenal. They play tremendously when they're in rhythm, and they ride the momentum of the game. An excellent job of that. However, second thing I noticed, Miami does a very poor job of starting off the game well. And you saw the same issues they had against Virginia Tech. And when they play with the highs of the wave, but also they play with the lows of the lows. They're very inconsistent. However, they're extremely talented. And what happens when you see a team like this is that typically they'll do a good job throughout the regular season. They might even win a conference championship because they're so talented and the highs can be so high. You just avoid playing in the lows, right? However, when you go up against a formidable opponent that matches your talent level and your credibility and your, for lack of better words, how good you are, you can't afford to play those lows. You can't afford to get into those low moments. And that's what this showed me with Miami, that they can play with the highs, but when they play low, it's really low. It looks really bad, and you saw this twice so far, 2 weeks in a row, at least against Virginia Tech, and obviously this week against Cal. And in Cam Ward, listen, he went 35 for 53. You throwing the ball 53 times, that tells me that you can't get into a rhythm off running the ball, which means that there's no balance to it. And if I'm on other teams in the ACC, I'm looking at that and saying, okay, well, I'm not too worried about Miami's rushing attack and what they've shown me with that. So let's add a dime package, add a nickel, and give more assistance to the coverage. Like I said, Cam Ward went 35-53, 437 yards, 2 touchdowns, interception. Listen, Cam Ward is also someone that is going to be on the high. I'm telling you guys right now, he'll be on the Heisman list this week for our Heisman watch list. And like I said, Miami had 138 yards rushing, led by Mark Fletcher, who had 81 yards and a touchdown. And Xavier Restrepo for the receiving corps had 7 receptions, 163 yards. But listen, Cal, they put up 38 points as well. And if you see what they did, they had 297 yards passing and 73 yards rushing. If I'm Miami, the number of yardage, the amount of yardage that Cal's able to get in the air is a bit of a cause for concern. And that secondary is a cause for concern. But also that was an issue against Virginia Tech. So, like I said, with a team like Miami, extremely talented, but you're starting to see where there could be some cause for concern. And you never want to struggle against a team like this, like Cal, because the longer that a team stays in the game against a top-ranked opponent, the more confidence that this starts to build within that program. And that's what happened with Cal. Same thing that happened with Vanderbilt. But listen, if you're Miami, it shows that you also have tremendous fortitude and toughness to bounce back and to not give up and to close out the game. And obviously they're still undefeated, so at the end of the day, you get the win. That's what matters most, right? And there still is, like I said, cause for concern. Nothing that's, nothing to write off the season about, but there are some things that need to be paid issuance to if you're Miami. But that inconsistency in their level of play is what keeps me from putting them in the top 5, and what keeps me from putting them in the same conversation as obviously Texas and Georgia and even Alabama and even Georgia, and another team that no one's talking about is Ohio State. Ohio State, in my opinion, looks like the second best in terms of consistency and what we've seen so far. Listen, Ohio State looks like the second best team in the country behind Texas, and that's something that no one's been talking about, because there's just been so much explosiveness going on in the top 5, top 10 throughout this past season, or so far this season. But let me know what you guys think. What do you guys think about this Miami comeback? Do you think there's cause for concern with Miami with their level of play and their inconsistency? or are they just so explosive where it doesn't matter? Let me know what you guys think in the comment section. In our next segment, guys, we're going to be talking about another upset that occurred over the weekend. As you can tell, that's the theme for our show for today, guys. Upsets. So be sure to stick around for that. You're not going to miss it. We'll be right back. All right, everybody, welcome back. In case you missed the second segment of our show, we were recapping the comeback that Miami put up against Cal this past weekend. And in this segment, guys, we're discussing another upset that occurred in the SEC, this time involving number 4 ranked Tennessee and their loss to Arkansas. So we're going to get right into that, guys. So like I said, this past weekend, Arkansas defeated Tennessee by a score of 19-14 and completely stifled the Tennessee passing game, holding Tennessee to just 158 yards passing and 174 yards on the ground. And something that's quite interesting that the Tennessee run game was, the interior of Tennessee's defense was something that was a staple point of this team, or is a staple point of this team, so far in the season. And they allowed Arkansas to have 134 yards rushing, which is above the average for what Arkansas has on the season. Not to mention that Tennessee also gave up 297 yards passing in the air, which is also above the average for what Arkansas has. But listen, Arkansas did a great job controlling the time of possession, and they did a great job of limiting the big plays for Tennessee. And we know that Arkansas is a very physical team. They're though they're young, they're extremely physical, and they have talent across that offensive line, especially that defensive line. We saw what they were able to do, or how they played against Oklahoma State. And once again, we talked about teams having letdowns and overlooking certain opponents. That appears to be what happened with this Tennessee team. They overlooked Arkansas, and Arkansas is a great team, and they proved how physical they can be. And something that I talked about a couple weeks ago is that, listen, though Tennessee beat Oklahoma, they struggled. They struggled a bit, and we know that Oklahoma is another physical team, a team that does a great job defensively, particularly in that front seven. And it seems to me that Tennessee, they put up these big numbers in their first 2 or 3 games against these smaller schools, and the offense looked formidable, it looked explosive. However, I, I believe we're starting to see more of what Tennessee actually is. Listen, Tennessee's a great team, great program. However, I don't believe they're as explosive as we thought they were. I believe those first three games were a bit of a mirage, and we were some people could have been fooled uh, because of the type of talent that Tennessee was playing. And I saw some reporters, I saw some analysts talking about how Tennessee's going to win a national championship. And listening to that and hearing that just told me that you're not really watching the football games. You're just looking at the scoreboard, looking at stats, and looking at the highlights. And you're making your assumptions, you're making your analysis off of that. And listen, I'm not saying that I know the most about football, because I do not. All I do is I play professional basketball and I talk about sports and how it correlates to life. That's it. But I still know enough about football, and I do enough research and studying and film study to know that what I've seen so far does not constitute Tennessee as a national championship contender. And something that I've seen so far, we talked about this on the show, is that the physicality is something that Tennessee struggles with. We saw what happened against Oklahoma. And Oklahoma is one of the better defensive teams in the country. But the reason Oklahoma isn't as good as they were last year, or how they will be, or they won't be as good this year as they were last year, is because they're not as explosive offensively. So the defense tends to get tired out quicker because the offense doesn't create as much fluidity, and it's not on the field as often, which means that the defense has to be on the field longer, which means they'll get tired out more, and they're more susceptible to the big play because of that. And that's why Oklahoma won't be as good, but however, they're still able to have the propensity to stop explosive teams, explosive offenses. And Tennessee, like I said, they struggle with physical teams. So how Tennessee fares against Georgia or Alabama coming up in the coming weeks, and that remains to be seen. But I think we saw a more closer approximation of what Tennessee actually is with this loss to Arkansas. And I said it last week, there's levels to the SEC, just like there's levels to the top 10, top 5. In the SEC, I still think it's Texas, Georgia, Alabama. And then under that, then you get your Tennessees and your Ole Miss. But I think there's a clear distinction between those top 3 and then the other teams under those top 3. But let me know what you guys think. What do you guys think about this loss for Tennessee? What do you guys think about Arkansas, this young program, this young Arkansas team that's perhaps starting to make waves? Listen, they're 4-2, 2-1 in the conference. Might have a legitimate chance of creating more noise, maybe more upsets in the SEC. Let me know what you guys think about that. Leave your thoughts in the comment section. And what do you guys think about this upset for Tennessee in comparison to the upset for Alabama? Is one perhaps worse than the other? And we talked earlier in the show about how Alabama, there is a little bit of cause concern, but it's nothing to become upset about or to be overtly worried about. Do you think the same thing is for Tennessee? Do you think there's not much of a cause for concern? Do you think that this is merely a blip in their season? Let me know what you guys think, man, because I'm quite certain that people are going to have different viewpoints and opinions on the losses for each program. But let me know what you guys think. Leave your thoughts in the comment section. I'm looking forward to hearing all about it. And in our next segment, guys, we're going to be discussing, once again, you guessed it, another upset. So be sure to stick around for that, guys. You're not going to miss it. We'll be right back. All right, everybody, welcome back. In case you missed our previous segment, we were recapping the upset loss for Tennessee, handed them by Arkansas. And once again, guys, in this segment, we are going to be recapping another upset that took place. Listen, as a reporter, as a journalist, you love, or it's much easier to create a schedule for a show after a week like this because the stories just write themselves. So it's much easier to provide coverage on weeks like this. Not saying that you like to see these teams get upset, but it definitely creates for better storytelling and, like I said, easier coverage, if you will. But like I said, USC suffered a loss at the hands of Minnesota. USC is now 3-2 on the season, 1-2 in the conference, and I was a little apprehensive to even call this an upset because, for those of you guys who've been watching our show for the entirety of this college football season, you guys know that I've been talking about how USC I didn't think was really that good, though their ranking would say otherwise. Ever since I saw them play against LSU, I knew what LSU was going to be this year. I know what they are this year. And I knew that that win against LSU for USC didn't really mean much in the grand scheme of things from my perspective. And, I saw how USC struggled against Michigan. And we saw that Michigan just lost to Washington. I mean, we're not going to cover that game because, once again, I don't really consider that an upset. I don't think Michigan was that good. But, I don't. It's hard for me to even call this an upset with Minnesota beating USC because I don't believe USC is that great. They're good, but I don't think they're, worthy of their top 11 of the 11 ranking in the country. I think they're closer more to 20 or 21, if that. But listen, they're 3-2 on the season, and like I said, they're I just don't. That transition to the Big Ten means something, and that's a real thing. There's a huge transitional shift, not just with recruiting, but also with the level of play and the type of play, the style of play that these Pac-12 teams have to go through. And the physicality, you can tell, it has had its toll on USC. Like I said, with going up against Michigan and how they fared against Minnesota this past weekend. It's that the transition is a real thing, and it's something that many people aren't talking about. And once again, this is another game where Miller Moss had multiple interceptions in a game. USC had 200 yards passing, 173 yards rushing, and if you look at the stat line, Minnesota only had 169 yards passing. However, they had almost 200 yards rushing, which has been the constant issue for USC over the course of this season. Their inability to stop the run. They struggled against LSU, even though they won. They struggled against Michigan. Michigan almost had 230 yards rushing, and that's why they won the game. And once again, Minnesota also has close to 200 yards rushing against USC, and that was the reason they won the game. They were able to control time of possession, limit opportunities for the USC offense by keeping them off the field, and they were able to execute in the red zone. Minnesota was. So if you're going to compete and you're going to be a great team in the Big Ten, you have to be able to stop the run. Every Big Ten team that has had success on the national stage and winning championships, looking at Michigan last year and Ohio State back in 2014, they both were amazing at stopping the run. They had great interiors on the D-line. And listen, if you want to be successful, you want to be proficient in the Big Ten, you have to be able to stop the run. Because all these big teams, they all like to stop the run. But the Big Ten teams that are great and great at separating themselves from the other teams, they are able to take away the run. And USC has not been able to do that. And I don't know if they will be able to do that this year, because they haven't shown me otherwise. So like I said, I don't see this really as an upset. I'm not surprised that USC lost. Um, Minnesota has ran the ball great all year, even though they're 3-3, 1-2 in the conference. Um, and, if you look at their rushing yards, they're doing quite well running the ball this season. Led by Darius Taylor, Marcus Major, and Max Brosner. They all do a great job running the ball. And like I said, I don't believe this is much of an upset for me. I just see it as this is what USC is. Marginal team, slightly above average, that plays in the Big Ten, has a great name, so they'll have a slightly higher ranking than what they should. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section. What do you guys think about this loss for USC? Would you guys consider this an upset? Is this a representation of what USC is, or do you think they're better than what their performance showed? Leave your thoughts in the comment section. But that being said, guys, listen, that's it for our show for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. It's been a wonderful show. If you haven't already, be sure to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button as well, so you guys can stay updated on all related content that we post daily. And if you'd like to support our network and our company, you do so by following the link in the ticker below. And if you'd like to gain exclusive content from Sorry to Bother You Show, you can do so by following us on Patreon. All our links will be in the description. And we'll be back again, guys, same time tomorrow with our NFL show and another college football show as well. Until then, guys, continue to stay safe, be vigilant, make smart decisions, and until next time, guys, peace.